Good morning. We'd like to begin. Thank you all for coming out this morning. I'm Janet Kidder with Bill Helm and BB Casey, your selectmen. This session is designed to give updates on some of the projects we are working on. You will hear from us as well from several department heads and the town administrator. We have several topics that we hope to speak on before opening it up for questions at the end of the session. Our plan is to wrap up around 9:30 so that you who have other plans for today can get to them. We know how many topics there are at an entire meeting, and we hope that we picked ones that are of interest to you and you learn more about them. So we'll begin with Chief Cobb and Tony DeLuzio.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chief Cobb. I'm the police chief here, and with me is Mr. Tony DeLuzio with Collier's Project Leaders. Some of you may recall a few weeks ago, the town of New London decided to engage the services of Collier's Project Leaders as a project manager for the idea of what to do with the police department, what a police station might look like on different pieces of property in town, and generally what that cost would be. So by engaging with Collier's Project Leaders, that's a very purposeful effort on our part, on the town's part, to try and answer some of those questions so that when you're faced with those types of decisions at town meeting, you can feel informed and feel that you have the information you need in order to make your decision. So our purpose here today is to give you an update of what the work is that we've done so far and kind of what the next steps might be. So I'll hand it over to Mr. DeLuzio.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance and allowing me to be here today. Mostly what we've been working on since I last stood in front of the Select Board is the site matrix that I see many of you have. And it's been a compilation of the previous work that was done by a site selection committee. Chief and I touring those sites, looking at other possibilities, and really putting them not in a narrative sense, but in a matrix that we could then rank and weight. So a little bit different than the study that was previously done. You'll see over on the far right-hand side, we've tried to give these points. We've also developed a color coding point system so that, red is stop. Those are usually our non-starter sites. Yellow is indicative of things that we generally see on a site. They're not good, they're not bad, they just need a little thought process put into them, or they are customarily dealt with through engineering, whether it's stormwater runoff or ledge, some characteristic of the site. So they're not uncommon for us to deal with and generally acceptable site condition. Green is what we really look at as a positive site. It's maybe got utilities nearby or very adjacent to the site. It's got larger acreage than what we would need, so there's future expansion, there's site amenities. It might be better elevational-wise for radio towers and communications. So those things tend to get green and get 2 points. The yellows get 1 point, the red gets no points, right? We don't want to pick a site that's got 5 or 6 characteristics in the red coloring. Those are generally non-starters. So we've been working on that matrix that you have, presenting that for further consideration. We've developed what's called an RFP, or request for proposal, for design services. And in the past, you've had a number of design architects, engineering services, evaluate the building, evaluate the police program, number of spaces, size of spaces, those types of areas and considerations. Those get a little bit old. Chiefs change, departments change, the characteristics and the operations change within a department from year to year, and in this case over several years. So we need to kind of refresh that for you all. We need to make sure that coming out of COVID, post-COVID, what changed? How did you operate? How do you want to plan for the next event? Many of us have learned how to operate differently in first responder situations through COVID, not just having a lot of extra storage space for masks and hygiene and cleaning, but if we ever had to move to a 6-foot separation zone again, how is that handled in a dispatching area where the dispatchers are literally sitting on top of each other, right? So we want to plan for the worst, hope for the best in all cases. Our next steps coming out of this meeting is to put that RFP out to design firms. A couple of them have worked on New London's projects in the past. There are a couple other entities in the area that we'd like to invite to submit a proposal. Our goal would be to take 2, maybe 3 of the sites on the list and have the engineer that's ultimately selected do what's called a test fit. So lay out a building on that site, lay out the parking areas, public parking versus secured police parking. Also analyze the existing facility. Let's get an update on that building. Building codes have changed since your last review of that building. Systems get older every year, right? Heating and cooling systems. What are the goals that the community's trying to look for sustainability, water, storm drainage, environmental concerns? And can the existing facility, if upgraded to accommodate the police operations, can it help with any of our sustainability goals, long-term environmental goals, or how can we reduce the operating costs? So you can see there's a lot of questions that I don't have the answers standing here today, but we have a path of how to get to those answers, how they're developed in a systematic and process order, that one piece of information educates and informs the next step, and those steps lead to the path of success that we hope to bring to New London.
Thank you. I can't say anything better than what he said.
Shall we does anyone have any questions of Tony? He made the drive up here, and I want to make it worth his while. So does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask now? Colin?
Tony, thank you. That was good. On the RFP, the requirements process and how you're developing those requirements, are you scoping out requirements on a prioritization basis with want versus need, and looking at what costs might be incurred based on those requirements? How is your RFP being built?
Yeah, so the RFP, as it's being put together, is mostly on the qualifications of the architectural firms that would be responding. So first, we want them to have experience with police stations and police operations, both in renovation, addition, and new construction. So this is really a qualifications about what they bring to the table, how much they would propose to provide those services for, what their team availability is, are they overstretched right now? And we're kind of we've got a little bit behind schedule, to be honest with you. We were hoping for January to have more information. It's going to be a little bit of a stretch right now. We didn't want to put that RFP out, get out over our skis, as they say. We wanted to have this meeting first, but it's keyed up, it's ready to go. I've contacted the firms to say, hey, I've got this thing in the wings and it's coming at you, but we're going to need a really quick turnaround. So if we can pick, as I said, 2 or 3 sites that they can do the test fits from, that will be beneficial in helping us meet our January schedule. When we do that, they will provide their information both on needs, wants, nice to haves, all that. Here's what fits in the existing facility. Here's what doesn't fit, right? So that you're able to then assess what is the value, how important is that particular aspect to the police operation or to the town, if it's going to be a trigger that says, well, if that's really important to you or to the community, then the current facility doesn't accommodate it, right? So we have needs and wants. You're absolutely right. We do that all the time. But in this case, we'll have the added column of what fits or doesn't fit in the existing facility. Now, that's not to say that the existing facility doesn't need renovation, mechanical upgrades, but just on a physicality, what fits and what doesn't. So you'll have that information.
And that's helpful. So it's a test fit that I was trying to get focused on. Where are the requirements being developed for the functional needs and wants of the department?
So that will come from interviewing the police department, right? A test fit, when we talk about test fit, that's going to be, a rectangle on a site plan that says this is a 6,000 square foot footprint. And we believe everything can fit in that footprint, whether it's 1 story, 2 story. Then we start to lay out parking, vehicle access, pedestrian access, because some of these sites are about an acre and a half. My sense is that's going to be a little tight. If you're okay with some pedestrian crossing vehicle traffic, police exiting the same entrance or drive entrance that the public would enter and exit from, those are going to be considerations that the police department, the select board, you all have to make. My job is to show you what fits and what those parameters are that are acceptable to you, but we'd like not to have it, right? We'd like police vehicles to be able to enter and exit the site without having personal vehicles driving in the same lane. But oftentimes that isn't able to be accommodated. Yep.
Carpeting and paint with no VOCs, things along those lines?
So, yeah, great question. Today's building code just keeps getting more and more stringent. Daylighting controls so that the lighting drops when the sun comes in. Everything is going to be considered. Recycled materials are very common now. We have a lot more availability than we did even 5 years ago, right? The manufacturers are all on board with a much more sustainable practice in how they manufacture, the carpet tiles that you see here today versus 5 years ago. We're a bit of a ways from dealing with building materials, right? So our first focus at this stage is going to be more on the environmental, stormwater, drainage, runoff, utilities. If we had a larger site, I think one of them's 6 or 7 acres, right? Do we want to do a solar carport? Is the building facing, is the particular site? And we've driven around and we've gone to these sites to say, okay, this building roof line might accommodate solar panels. Your building isn't so big that it wouldn't be a great idea to put some solar on there. Even if we use it for recovery of hot water, it may not power the whole building, but it's very helpful in some of that consideration of electrical. We'd also like to look at geothermal. We're in an area, you've got some areas here that you're going to hit ledge 7 feet below ground. Probably not conducive to drill a 1,500-foot well through ledge. Our conductivity just is never going to give you a payback for that type of area, but we want to take a look at it. That, again, is a little bit further down. These sites are in consideration. I don't know that property owners, without having some form of purchase and sales agreement, are going to let us get out there and drill a bunch of holes for a day to find out, yes, thank you for letting us come out here. Your property is not conducive to our project. We're going to take a pass, right? So we get in that position where we've got to do a little investigation before we can figure out what the paybacks are.
Thank you. I see in your sheet here that for the current police station that the neighboring property is not available, so it's red. So what steps were taken to ascertain that? Have you talked to the owner? Have you made offers? I mean, can you give us a status report on that?
Certainly no offers have been made, but there is someone currently living there. It's being rented out, and my understanding is that it's going to be continue to be rented out. But no substantive offers have ever been made, to my knowledge, someone correct me if I'm wrong, to that homeowner. Thanks. Lynn's getting her
Yeah, thank you. Just a curiosity, new to the area, and this is a nit, but the grid is very helpful. Thank you. That's because we've heard a number of sites mentioned, and this kind of helps us put it in perspective. I always viewed this as a negative, but it ends up as a positive, although in each column. Why is no natural gas anywhere a positive? Just a point of curiosity for me.
I think because then we don't have to contend with building or doing any sort of construction around an area where there's natural gas.
Okay. Didn't think that was a big deal, but okay.
Tony could probably.
It's not really a big deal. Many of our clients are looking for net zero and less fossil fuels, less gas. So we've kind of shifted our coloring. Other projects 3, 4, 5 years ago, having gas in the street where we can grab a line and pull it into the building for heating, was a benefit. Now many communities ask us for alternative fuel sources and how are we heating and cooling the building again, either geotherm or electric heat pumps. So we're finding having gas in the available area less of a benefit. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'm always available to have folks ask questions if you think of something after today. I know we have a long agenda, so we don't want to take up too much time, but you know where to find me. So.
Thank you, Tony. We appreciate you coming up.
Got good breakfast area, place in the area.
And the Blue Loon.
I'm going to hang around for a little at the back if anybody
Okay,
wants to.
great, good. All right, our next item is we're going to have Putnam Kidder, Chief Cobb, and Chief Lyon. They'll talk about the wildly successful Halloween event.
Good morning. So my name is Putnam Kidder. I'm the Recreation Director, and thank you all for coming out. It's great to see so many people here and caring about what our town does and says and offering your voice. It's really great. So I'm here, I know we're focused on other holidays right now, but I'm here to rewind a little bit and talk about our Halloween events here through the rec department. This is what we're looking at. This is drone footage from above, from the drone, the police department drone of Main Street during the event, which happened on the 29th of October. So this kind of gives you an idea of the number of people and how they're spread out and how the closure of Main Street is very helpful for this event being safe. Yes.
This is we're going to look at the same video. This is the thermal view, or the FLIR. So all those black dots, those are emanating some form of heat. So those are all people. As you look around, you can see other little black spaces around, like if you look at the cars, the car hoods, but those are all people. So we're going to show it to you in 2 different versions, but I think it's really interesting to look at this one versus the color one we'll show you in just a minute to really highlight just how many people here or come here to town for this event. And this was at, I think, 5 minutes to 5 p.m. It was like 4:54 p.m. So they're just about a minute long, but they're very interesting to see. And we are approaching the Barn Playhouse on the upper left of the screen. So, yep, that's where William Street is, and that's where the closure began on that end. And so here we are.
Maybe you could spot yourself.
Yeah. So the drone footage and the drone is operated by Officer Joe Walls, and it was purchased by the Benevolent Association through very generous donations from folks in the past. And so it's a great tool that we have at our disposal for certainly for police operations and for events like this. We're able to use it in a variety of applications, the drone. So it is a very useful tool, and so something that we could help inform decisions in the future. For example, Parkside on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that we had a lot of parking there. So we always look at that. Is parking on, or excuse me, is that, yeah, that's parking, yeah. Is parking on Parkside acceptable on that side of the street? Is there enough room for emergency vehicles to pass through? What parking lots were utilized the most? You can see the barn was. So it helps inform our decisions and to hopefully do our job even better next year if there's any areas for opportunity.
Okay.
So this event started last March with a group, including myself, Chief Cobb, Chief Lyon, the Rec Commission Chair, and several other volunteers. We started meeting monthly to, we have some photos too. Monthly to start to plan and organize the event and find other groups to collaborate with to put it on. And another part of the event is that we do a candy drive where town and community people are able to donate funds and then also donate actual candy to be dispersed out to the people who are in the closed area so they can be have candy to hand out because they get a lot of trick-or-treaters. It's totally voluntary for the people who are in the closed area, residents that are handing out candy, so they don't have to. But if they did, they were generous enough to be part of the event, we wanted to offer them a big, huge bag of candy that they could give out to the people who would be coming to their door. So I know people appreciate that. We handed out over 100 pounds of candy that I delivered to people. Maybe some people got some of that candy. Whether they handed it out or they actually got it, but I know people really appreciate that, and we do have many of the businesses who are also part of it and hand out candy to all the people who are there. So the event was on Sunday the 29th from 4 to 8 p.m. and it involved several different parts. One part was where we were in the municipal parking lot. The rec van was there. There were a few other community groups there. We had games and activities. We had a very popular group of dancing witches, which are from the local Zumba class. Maybe you saw them. They were very popular. People really liked them a lot. So we were kind of centered there. And then we had another event at the Outing Club, hosted a Monster Kids Bash at the SAU gym, another place for people able to go to. That was exciting for folks. And then there was the New London Historical Society collaborated with us for the first time on a historic ghosts walking tour, which was another really interesting event that added a different kind of flavor to it, that you were able to walk along a guided tour to different areas on Main Street and see people in costume and learn about historic parts of the town, and then historic figures through the state. So that was really fun and different, and added a different kind of, like I said, flavor to the event. And then after the closure, there was a spooky walk, which was something that had happened before on the trails behind the SAU building, where the Barn Playhouse collaborated with us to have performers in the woods, and people were able to walk along through there. It was kind of a haunted fairy tale theme. We had over 100 people who did that, and I was at the front, and there were all sorts of screams and of happiness and delight back there. So that was a great thing to be able to do. Yes, they were loud for sure. So this year we welcomed probably about 2,500 people approximately to the event, and that was smaller than in previous years due to the weather. The weather, we got lucky this year, was pretty gross before and afterwards, but last year and the year before we were at over 3,500 people, so it's quite an event. We had 20 community volunteers to help put on the event. We had over 35 town employees, many of being the fire department and the police department and the Department of Public Works, who worked together to put this event on with me. And I can't thank both chiefs enough to be able to have their guidance in putting on the event in a safe, organized, and well-run way that I think showed in how the event was put on. And every year we learn from it, and every year we hope to make it a little bit better, but it's a wonder event that people really enjoy. Just a plug for other things coming up with the rec department. We do have a survey on the website, the town website, rec department, if you want to offer feedback about that event, other events, or how you can maybe help out the rec event in the future. So I think that's about all I have to say.
Chief Lyon, would you like to comment?
Yeah, it's a great collaboration between all the town agencies or departments, and certainly having people take time out of their Sunday in order to put this event together is fantastic. And obviously we focus on safety. I think this year went really, really well. And well planned out, having a standby ambulance, different facilities. So if individuals needed to visit restrooms or whatever the case was, it's great. And also the collaboration and planning throughout the year makes this a successful event. So it seemed like it was almost every other week there coming up to Halloween, but we actually started last spring looking at things to have a successful fruition of the Main Street closing.
Thank you all. Gary?
It may have been sponsored by Gutzel and Phipps. I'm not sure, from the Halloween dental office.
And I did just want to say, to talk about the collaboration, that I didn't mention that it was the New London Barn Playhouse, the Outing Club, the Historical Society, the SAU, First Baptist Church, Spring Ledge Farm, New London Hospital Emergency Services, and all the town departments. So it was really a community kind of effort to put this on. So.
Okay, thanks. Give it to Kim. Kim Hallquist, our town administrator, is going to update you on the completed wage survey and classification and compensation study. So, Kim.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out. The selectmen recognize that the employment environment has been changing. I think a lot of it was due to COVID. People got used to staying home. There's less people in the workforce here in New Hampshire, so there's lots of reasons for that. But the selectmen recognize the importance of keeping the talented staff that we currently have. So they engaged the services of Municipal Resources Incorporated to do a wage study. The last one we did was 2016. So we did this one to ensure that the staff we have are properly graded and compensated. And the selectmen got some very valuable information, which allowed them to make some changes both in grades and in salaries. So that was very helpful, and we hope to keep the staff we have. This information will allow us to properly compensate, keep the staff we have, and when we do have staff leave, which I hope is only due to retirements, and we have none that are stolen from other municipalities, we'll have the pay grades in place to attract those new employees. The selectmen are almost done with it. We do still need to look at things like benefits such as sick time, leave time, and those kinds of things. So we'll be making some tweaks to that as well. Again, all in the interest of keeping the staff we have here and being able to attract when we have to. So that's about it on the salary study. Does anyone have any questions on that? Be assured we're doing our best to keep all the people that are serving you so well. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Kim. Chief Lyon, would you like to tell us about your new fire truck? Our new fire truck.
Yeah, your new fire truck.
That's right.
So a group of us went out to Hamburg, New York. If people aren't aware, Hamburg is right next to or just south of Buffalo. So that's one of the Great Lakes behind the picture of the new piece of apparatus, clearly not labeled yet. So this piece of equipment was approved 2 town meetings ago. And now, if we were to order an engine, and so this is a rescue engine, so it's multifunctional. So all the pieces of apparatus that we have serve different purposes. Our ladder isn't just a straight stick ladder, it also can flow water. So this not only has the capabilities of fire suppression, it also has the capabilities of rescue, confined space, high-angle rescue ropes. This picture, the crew is going through. We drove out. It takes about 8 hours to get out to Hamburg, and then spend 7 to 8 hours going through the entire piece of apparatus. So in this case, the captain and a couple of firefighters are testing the light tower. So on the front of the vehicle, there's a stand. I'm not sure if I'll get feedback if I walk up here. So there's a stand right here. So this is a remote control. Here's a light tower. So when we pull up to a motor vehicle accident at night, which we respond to anywhere from 800 to 950 calls annually. Out of those calls, about 150 of those are motor vehicle accidents. So this is the piece of apparatus that goes to a lot of motor vehicle accidents. Lighting is important because motor vehicle accidents don't just happen during the daytime hours, but you also have compartments for dunnage or material that we'd use to stabilize vehicles. It's a lot better laid out than our old piece of equipment. It's certainly, I think, safer. So for instance, if you forward to the next slide, maybe. So for instance, having a full ladder to get up to the top of the hose bed, is important. Now we currently go up steps that fold out, so this actually articulates out, so it's easier to get up on top of that piece of equipment. To the back left-hand side is a controller. That's for our airbags. This engine has 750 gallons of water. It has a 50-gallon foam tank for fire suppression, but it also has a CAF system, which is a compressed air foam system. So instead of just using water, it injects air and foam, which normally, when we spray water, only about 5 to 10% of the water that we spray on a fire actually is used to extinguish the fire. In this case, it's about 80 to 85%. So we can carry less water and have it more effective from a fire suppression standpoint. The airbag control is used for a motor vehicle accident or confined space where someone may be entrapped and you need airbags to lift up the vehicle or to pry open a piece of equipment in order to get the patient out. So this was really, really well laid out. A lot of storage up top. Ironically, it's 4 inches shorter than our current piece of apparatus, which is kind of neat, especially since that's one of the concerns of the station. Because it was built in 1972, our doors are only 11 feet tall. So that's one of the considerations when speccing out a piece of equipment. So we were out there mid-November. They're still working on finalizing some stuff. It will go just north of Burlington, Vermont, to the dealership to DeSourcy Fire Equipment, and then ultimately be lettered up and work its way down here. We're hoping to have it here for today's meeting and park it outside, but it looks like town meeting will have it out, and you can certainly take a look or stop into the station. We can give you a tour. We're pretty excited about it. If we were to order this piece of equipment today, it would be 27 months from a planning perspective. So, and that's for all engines. Unfortunately, with COVID and some of the manufacturing delays, also just a lot of departments buying pieces of equipment. If you were to buy a ladder truck, it's 920 days, which is pretty crazy to think.
So can we sit in it, blow the horn?
Absolutely, it's your truck. We just wash it for you. So.
Does anyone have any questions for Jay? Okay, thank you, Chief.
Jay, is this a brand new truck? Was it manufactured in Hamburg?
This is a brand new piece of fire equipment. The cabin chassis, so the front of the truck was actually manufactured in Florida, Ocala, Florida, and then shipped up to Hamburg, where the stainless body was put on. Hamburg's the only place that does stainless steel bodies for E1. And obviously, with the corrosion issues that we have with the interstate, it's important to have stuff that's non-corrosive, just because we're keeping our pieces of equipment at least 20 years.
Okay. All right, now we're going to hear from our Planning Board Chairman, Tim Parity, and our Town Planner, Adam Ricker, and they're going to talk about potential zoning amendments.
Good morning, everyone. Adam Ricker, Tim Parity, the Planning Board Chair, if you don't know him. So earlier this week on Tuesday night, the Planning Board worked to finalize the potential zoning amendments that you will see possibly for this town meeting season. For those of you who aren't aware of how that works, we will now work to get the public hearing noticed and set up for January 9th. So on January 9th, you can come to a Planning Board meeting and participate in a discussion about the zoning amendments. The Planning Board has a final opportunity that evening to modify something, to decide not to move forward on something, and then if they make a substantive change that night, there's a second public hearing that is held on January 23rd. And then from that point, you finalize what actually goes forward to town meeting for what you all vote on. So as the list stands right now, we'll sort of go through a very brief overview. We can't, in the time we have here, go through all of the details of what are proposed, and they'll be on the website early next week, but hopefully to give you a little bit of an understanding. So the first two amendments have to do with the cluster subdivision and the planned unit development sections of the zoning ordinance. So a cluster subdivision is like Great Pines or the detached portion of Fenwood, and a planned unit development is like a condo association, so the back portion of Fenwood or Hilltop. And so in both cases, the zoning ordinance has not allowed for those developments on anything less than 5 acres. So in each style of development, you don't get any additional units than you would if you were building just single-family homes in those zones. It just allows you to build in a more compact area that's more environmentally friendly for the land that you're disturbing. And in both cases, you are required to reserve a significant amount of land for open common area. So what the planning board would like to do to encourage some potential small-scale infill development, quite frankly, we don't have a lot of 5-acre plus lots left within the areas that these two development styles can occur, is to remove that 5-acre minimum so that if you had a small condo conversion of an existing building like the Barton condominiums or the old hospital condominiums on Main Street, that something like that could occur. And so in doing that, the current 100-foot buffers don't make sense. If you only have a half an acre lot like the Barton condominium conversion, you could not get a 100-foot buffer around the perimeter of that and make that work. So those are the two separate amendments, cluster and planned unit, but essentially the same concept involved in those two. The third amendment is to adjust how we look at the side yard setbacks in the R2 residential zone and the R1 urban residential lots that are not served by water and sewer. So the vast majority of R1 is served by water and sewer, and this is not applicable, but there is a section of R1, like in Elkins, where there's not water and sewer. So how it's set up currently, it's unique. So we allow for a 20-foot side yard setback on one side, and then your two sides have to add to 50 feet. So if you go down to 20 feet on one side, you have to have 30 feet on the other side. If you're at 25 feet on one side, you can be at 25 feet on the other side. And there's no rhyme or reason to which one of your neighbors gets the 30 feet and which gets the 20 feet. And it's presented some unfortunate design exercises in being able to place a lot on a property. And we don't really know the history. It's been in the zoning ordinance for a long time. I've never seen it in another zoning ordinance, and I get that comment from engineers on a regular basis. And so what we would like to propose is a flat 20. We really can't, we had the discussion about going to 25 even on both sides, but unfortunately what we would do there after decades of allowing 20 feet on one side, we would be catapulting all of those properties into a legal non-conforming situation. And so we think it makes the most sense to just define it at an even 20 feet on both sides of the property. And then we will also be proposing some changes to our floodplain regulations. So we don't have much control over our floodplain regulations. In order for towns to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, which provides properties that are in the floodplain the ability to get flood insurance, we have to abide by a very specific set of standards that come down from the federal government through the state. And so the state has been working to remap the Kentucky watershed, which includes about half of New London, sort of the Pleasant Lake watershed, half of the town. And in doing so, they've made some adjustments that we need to accommodate for in the zoning ordinance. And the state really reviews our ordinance and tells us exactly what it is we need to change in order to stay compliant. And so now we need to adopt those changes. So though you have the ability to vote yes or no, we really need to adopt these in order for our neighbors whose houses are in the floodplain to maintain their flood insurance. They, as part of this mapping project, some people will be being notified that their floodplain status has changed. That's really a process that happens outside of anything we have control over. When FEMA adopts the new floodplain maps, those are the boundaries that we have to live by. The old floodplain maps were mapped, really from aerial imagery and, basically from a computer program. And they weren't that accurate. I'm sure there are many of you in this room who have a LOMA, which is a letter of map amendment, where you've proven to the government that your house is actually not in the floodplain, no matter that they say it is. And so the new map should be a lot more accurate. There are a couple of properties that will now have portions in the floodplain, but in the most part, the changes are that properties are having less floodplain on their property. So that's the Fourth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment, which is probably has gained the most attention and will continue, is a collaborative effort between the New London Housing Commission and the Planning Board to work on addressing our some modifications to our accessory dwelling unit. So as you're all aware, we've allowed accessory dwelling units to be attached for many years. Obviously, the change in the housing crisis has required us to take a little bit deeper look at that. We've had requests for some additional flexibility in what we're allowing for accessory dwelling units. And so the group has decided to move forward with allowing the potential for a detached accessory dwelling unit, to increase from allowing up to a 2-bedroom maximum to a 3-bedroom maximum. Since the 2-bedroom was written many years ago, people's lives have changed. They're now using bedrooms as home offices, and where do you put your child's bedroom if you need to work from home in your house? And so we want to provide a little bit more flexibility there, and to increase the size from 1,000 square foot interior finished living space maximum to 1,250 interior living space. Since 2016, we've had 14 property owners take advantage of the accessory dwelling unit regulations and go through the process, which may not sound like a huge number, but it's 14 modest-sized apartments that we didn't have before 2016. And so, hopefully it's been unrecognizable to folks. That's the entire, point behind ADUs, is that they really blend in and it doesn't, change things. The piece that I think will probably draw the most conversation is the ability for property owners to include an attached accessory dwelling unit as well as a detached accessory dwelling unit if they want, as long as they are not within the Shoreland Overlay District. Shoreland Overlay District properties would, as it's proposed, would still be bound to a single accessory dwelling unit, but they would have the flexibility to choose whether that be attached or detached. And of course, those properties are already subject to maximum impervious areas within the Shoreland Overlay District, and so none of that would change. So they don't necessarily have the ability to add more square feet overall. They could just potentially divide it up between the primary. One thing that is not proposed to change is that in order to have an accessory dwelling unit, the property owner must legally reside at the property in either the accessory dwelling unit or in the primary unit. And additionally, short-term rentals would not be allowed in the accessory dwelling unit, and short-term being defined as anything less than 90 days. And then the last amendment on the docket is a amendment by petition. And so I think probably most people are aware that 25 voters can group together and submit a petition zoning amendment. And so we have received one to modify the definition of a lodging house to include short-term rentals in that definition, and to add the requirement of a conditional use permit for those lodging house uses. So that's sort of it in a nutshell. This is all sort of transpired this week, so we're working to get all of the notices completed and documents up on the website. They should be up early to mid part of next week. There should be a link right on the front of the website that says proposed zoning amendments. You can see them redlined with things slashed that are proposed to be taken out. And then they should also be put under the January 9th meeting materials relatively soon.
Make it come in.
Just want to add the underlying zoning wouldn't change for any of you. Just have to meet the setbacks and all that.
Right. So with the accessory dwelling units, as is the case now, your underlying requirements of setbacks and all of the other standards of the zoning ordinance would still apply.
Yeah, that's all I would add.
Okay. was very comprehensive.
Hopefully I didn't take too much of the agenda.
Yeah, no, that was great. Does anyone have any questions for Adam or Tim? Yes?
Yes, Mary Rocco. Last night there was some discussion about the accessory dwelling units, and the select board was deciding whether or not they would go forward with an attached and a detached on the same lot. Is that my understanding now?
So, no disrespect to the select board, but it's not something they have power.
Control over whether it goes forward. That's the planning board. What
agree with it.
whether or not we agree with support with doing it or not. And we haven't discussed it yet. That's the first we really heard about it was last night.
Thank you.
And one other thing that I do just want to add too is I want to make sure that feedback that we do get from the public, it's really helpful that if it's either in writing or if you're able to come to the January 9th public hearing. And that's really just so that everyone on the planning board who's voting on this has the benefit of getting the same information.
I'm just curious about something that's a little different from what you've discussed.
Sure.
When someone's denied a permit,
Can you state your name?
oh, Ann
This
Harris.
is being recorded.
Sorry, Ann
Thank you.
Harris. When someone's denied a permit and they go ahead with the work anyway, what is the, what happens?
So it's that's probably a case-by-case basis. Oftentimes we don't know that the work has happened until someone lets us know. So once that's happened, we follow up with the property owner. I would say 95% of the time they voluntarily comply. They're charged an after-the-fact fee, but they work with us and cooperate to go through the process. Depending on what the permit is, depending on what the circumstances are, there are a variety of different avenues that can take, and it's really specific to each case. If a property owner were to not cooperate, obviously then there's legal recourse, and that can take a very long time to work through.
Thanks, Adam. Bob?
Yep. Thank you. So I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this. So I went to the select board meeting last night and heard a good discussion about the whole plan. So the way I understand it, a change was made back in 2016 that allowed to have an attached unit, and
that change wasn't made in that we've allowed attached from before that. There were changes made in 2016.
Okay, so thank you. So basically you've added 14 units have been added. To me, that sounds about right, 14. So what is your goal by changing this now? I've got to believe you've sat down and said, we've had so much interest from people that want to move to New London, but they can't for whatever reason, caregivers, workforce housing, whatever. What is your target, and what number do you expect to have by, say, 2025, 2026?
I don't think we can necessarily put a number on what we expect. We can say that we've had a couple a year. So if providing this flexibility increases that by 50%, maybe we have 3 or 4 a year. So I guess in 2 years, maybe we have 8 or 9 more. I think the primary objective here is to offer a diversified offering of housing. I have gotten a significant number of phone calls from folks looking to house younger family members, whether that's adult children and their children who would like to move back to the area for a variety of reasons and they can't afford to come back to the area. The parents who are living here don't necessarily want to share walls with their kids and grandkids, and they would like to maintain a little bit of privacy. And then the flip side of that, a significant number of folks who are needing to care for elderly parents who would like to have them on the property. It doesn't always work to fit that into the attached unit. A lot of our attached accessory dwelling units end up in unused attic space or over a garage that's attached, which obviously doesn't lend itself well for seniors to live. but it's also the same example of just wanting to maintain some level of independence and privacy while being on the same property. And then the third component, which certainly plays into it, is the childcare is extremely difficult for families to get, and people are looking for other avenues like bringing in through the au pair program or to hire a nanny. And oftentimes you are required to provide housing for those individuals, and they don't necessarily want to have them in their same unit or attached. And for many families, that's really the only option.
So thank you for that. So sorry to interrupt, but I'm struggling to understand, because last night Ken from the Water Precinct was very concerned that if we have, beginning with additional development, could be a very big impact on our water system. But what you're saying here, it's only going to be maybe a handful of years. So why is Ken so concerned?
I can't speak for Ken. I would further that with saying of the 14 that we have, 30% or less are in the water precinct. Obviously properties within the water precinct are a little bit more constrained. They're typically on smaller lots where the house takes up more of the property. So there's not as much flexibility there to add an attached or a detached. And so, it sort of whittles it down even further. That this is allowed town-wide, so the 14 are spread, all throughout the town.
So just for everybody here that wasn't at the meeting last night, Ken from the Water Precinct did express, try to use the right word, concern over continued development and the impact on the water system. And he was talking about not just a small amount, but multi-millions of dollars if we had to change our current water system to accommodate. And I don't know what that number is. That's why I asked. I mean, if it's a handful, it doesn't sound like much. It seems to me we need to have a reckoning between that number and what the Water Precinct is saying. And right now, I don't have a strong feeling for that. So I'd hate to get into a situation where, oh, surprise, 3 years from now, we'd had 50 of these things go in and we've got to find a new water system. So I think that would be important information for us to have as we think about voting on this, which we will vote on at the next meeting. My last point is, or question is, why not just do this by application? Why do we have to change anything? Why not just say, hey, if you want to do this, come and talk to us, put in the application, and we'll go review it. And we may say yes, we may say no. I mean, simple thing, pretty simple.
It would be nice if it was that simple. However, when something's in the zoning ordinance, we don't have the ability to just change something. That is the ordinance that is in effect. And the only relief from that is to go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment and seek a variance. And there's 5 criteria of a variance. They're each nuanced, but one of them is a hardship, which is difficult to prove. And it's not a financial hardship. There has to be some hardship with the property and with the use. And they're not easy to obtain. And it's designed by, it's not supposed to be easy to vary from the zoning ordinance. You've all agreed to a set of rules, and you expect that that's what's in place. So unfortunately, we don't have the latitude to sit down with somebody and say, this seems like a reasonable use. Yes, we approve that. And so amending the zoning ordinance is really the only way. And they can't do detached now. One point that I do just want to make as far as development, future development in the water precinct, I think the planning board and the folks, they're in a position where they have continually heard from community members and anchor institutions like Colby-Sawyer and New London Hospital that they need housing, and they cannot guarantee the strength of those institutions if they don't have the human resources here to run them, and housing is a direct detriment to recruitment. And so there's always going to be constraints outside of what the zoning ordinance says a developer can build, and there's all sorts of feasibility studies that go into a potential development. Do you have water? Do you have sewer capacity? But the planning board's opinion on that is that the portion they control is the zoning ordinance. And so just saying on paper that you can get this does not necessarily guarantee that you're going to have access to utilities and power. And that's a part of the developer's process to make sure that's the case. But they don't want to be putting a barrier in place that people can't even get to that point to look at projects.
Okay. Steve?
Thank you very much. My name is Steve Root. I am a member of the Zoning Board of Adjustment, so I have some familiarity with zoning. First question, Adam, has on the lodging petitioned amendment. I hadn't seen that before. Has the planning board endorsed that, or
They haven't seen it yet, Steve. It came in Wednesday afternoon, and we met Tuesday night. So
okay, all right. So on the ADU issue, I am one of the persons who has raised some concerns. But to start with, I acknowledge, and we all know that affordable housing and housing that workers can live in the area is very important. And so it is an issue that's being worked on. The place that, and also as Adam points out, ADUs are desirable now for elderly people living with their younger family, caregivers, younger people living with their family when they escaped from Manhattan and COVID. And so loosening the rules is not something I'm opposing. But where I'm having some issue is the proposal to allow 2 ADUs on virtually every lot in town except for those that are within 250 feet of a waterfront. And here's my concern. We have zoning in the biggest zones for residential are R2, which have a 2-acre minimum. Forest conservation is 25-acre minimum. The agriculture rural residential called ARR is a 4-acre minimum. And so our zoning is designed to essentially allow one dwelling, one family on each of those, and then if they currently would like an attached ADU, they could do it. We're now proposing to allow up to 3 dwellings, families on 4-acre ARR, on 25-acre conservation, and on 2-acre residential. And the rationale is more affordable housing. I think that's the driver of this 2 proposal. If I want my elderly parents to live with me, I don't need 2 ADUs, only need 1. And the flaw in the reasoning, in my view, is that it is not possible in New London to construct housing that's consistent with our housing standards and the character of the town in a way that will be affordable. And so what we're doing is authorizing more luxury housing for on lots, and we're increasing density. And so I think we're going too far with the 2 ADUs on each lot. That's my point. So as a side issue, in our town master plan, the first of the vision statements talks about promoting development in core areas. The proposal for 2 ADUs on every lot doesn't even attempt to limit that intensive development to the core areas. It's all over town. So I'm making 2 points. One is I don't think we should be authorizing 2 ADUs on every lot, but if there's a compelling case for that, it still should be limited, in my view, to areas that are more of the core areas of town. Thanks very much.
And to just follow up on that, I think the planning board will have more discussion on that on the 9th. I do think it's important to remember, out of 4,000 of you, only 14 have looked to have an ADU, 1 ADU. And so to have 2, it's probably going to be even a smaller subset of those 14 who want to come back and have a potential second one.
My concern would be more about the compliance of Matt Ross, New London. If you have an influx of development on ADUs and even the proposed making developments on smaller lots under 5 acres, you're going to have an influx possibly of development. The zoning board has stated that they don't have the time to go out and enforce a lot of these things that are happening. Do we have an enforcement compliance in place for if that happens? What is the current compliance enforcement protocol?
So first of all, the zoning board is not an enforcement body, so they don't have the authority to be able to do that. And so it's, I wear multiple hats as town planner and zoning administrator. And so you would reach out to my office. Obviously, we don't have a code enforcement officer as far as building code goes for. If it was a multifamily building or a commercial, the state fire marshal's office is involved in the code compliance. As far as if there were a small cluster development. So essentially, this would allow a cluster development of 3 or 4 single-family homes. So it would be similar to a 3 or 4 single building permits coming in, and they might not all happen at the same time. It's not uncommon if you look at like a Harry Snow cluster subdivision over the last 20 years. Houses get built 1 or 2 at a time, so it's not like they necessarily are all built immediately, and they work with our office to go through and make sure that what they propose meets the regulation, and then what's built meets what they proposed. I think Maureen has a question, Lynn.
I'm Maureen Strong. I was on Main Street. I don't want to use that. I'm pretty loud.
All right. Owner of our number 2 ADU.
I just wanted to go back a little bit because I'm hearing so much about ADUs. And when they first came out, it was to help people like me, who's an older person who wants to age in place. And I was able to build a separate a 1-bedroom apartment with a separate entrance. You can't even see it from Main Street. I've had a tenant now for 5 or 6 years. I think I was the first ADU.
I think you were the second. Dave Demers was number 1.
Oh, okay. And what it's enabled me is to have a tenant, a rent-paying tenant, who will help me to keep the property up because I'm no longer able to do a lot of the gardening and the clipping and the taking down of limbs. And this has enabled me to stay there, and because my wish is to stay there for the rest of my life. So I just wanted to say that's a positive that I'd like. I'm not even sure if Adam covered that or not, but you probably did. But I just had to speak up. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Okay, are there any other? Karen?
Hi, my name is Karen Epstein, and I live in what is considered the core area of town. And Steve and I have been having some back and forth. So we just met actually a couple of nights ago. So we're becoming like sort of best friends, but not, because we have a different perspective here.
See, the planning board brings all your neighbors together. Come hang out with
in the
us.
strangest ways. What Steve makes the case for is carving out the core area so that this new zoning would apply to that. And I would make 2 cases. One, that what is consistent with the core should apply to the rest of the town, because I think that's fair. If the desire for the town is diversity in housing and to accommodate what was just talked about, that shouldn't be just assigned to the core. And on the flip side, I was thinking, I could look at it this way too, that last year, or actually this year, there was zoning changes that did apply to the core. And Ken, at last night's talk, mentioned the potential build-out in the core area with regard. So I feel like a lot has happened in the core. So maybe it's the flip side, that the core part of town needs a hiatus, and it's the other part of town with the zoning change should apply. So those are my 2 thoughts on that. Thank you.
I'm going to take one more question, and then we really need to move on. Celeste?
Hi, I'm Celeste Cook. I'm the welfare officer in New London. I just want to say that whatever we can possibly do to create more housing, some of it should be affordable. We've had people living in their trucks in the parking lot at the hospital. I spend a lot of my time trying to find housing for people that are in tough shapes. So I really hope that we do something to continue to work to get housing for people that are not as privileged as the rest of us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Janet, can I have 1 second?
Adam.
So I do just want to address real quick some concerns around some of the zoning changes that have come into place in the last few years and how they pertain to some developments that have approvals right now. So none of the zoning ordinance changes have impacted really the ability for Continuum or Twin Pines to get their number of units. Continuum, the New London Place assisted independent living facility, that's been on the drawing board since 2017. They've actually continually reduced the number of units that they are proposing, and that density was not impacted by any of the changes that have been approved to date. The Twin Pines project was able to benefit from the rollback to the 5,000 square foot density in the commercial, which is what it was historically. But in their case, that only changed the process in which they needed to go through to get the 60 units. They qualified as workforce housing. They always will, because that's required in perpetuity. And under our workforce housing overlay district of 2009, those projects have the ability to come to the planning board, and they could have showed the planning board exactly how many units they needed to build in order to make it financially feasible. So regardless of the change in zoning, they could have gotten 60 units, or if they had gotten that avenue, frankly, they probably could have gotten more than 60 units. And so it did change their process. It did not necessarily change the number of units that totaled out. The one project where it did result in a different number of units and we had a developer come back is 406 Main Street behind Pella Windows and Doors, the old Village Sports Shop. They had approvals for 3 units on their property to build behind, and the change in density did allow for them to come back and build 2 more units underneath. So there will be 3 units upstairs and 2 garden level apartments, all less than 700 square feet, I think. And so it did allow for some modest 2 additional units in that. But I do think that there is confusion. I mean, the developments were in front of the planning board at similar times that these changes were being voted on. And so timelines can get fuzzy, but I just wanted to make sure that that was understood.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. Tim and Adam, I guess we're all set because I know you have to go somewhere, right? Yeah. Okay. Bill is going to discuss the status of the water precinct and updates on Twin Pines and Continuum.
Thank you. I don't know who set up the order of this agenda, but I feel like I've been set up, so here we go. Two other items, Twin Pines and Continuum are on my list also. I'll make those really easy. Continuum, the only update for New London Place is that some of you have seen the temporary road that's been built in, and they are working toward drilling some test wells and seeing if they can get water capacity on site. Twin Pines, otherwise known as Long Meadows Common, is continuing to work with the State Financial Housing Authority on funding and grants and that sort of thing, and that continues. And as evident by what Adam was just saying, development takes a long time. Stay tuned. Both those projects continue to move at the normal development pace, which is slow. Turning to water, many of you in the audience here were with us last night. That was referred to a couple of times. The Ken that was referred to is Ken Jakes. Ken Jakes is the chair of the New London Springfield Water Precinct, which is a separate municipal entity, not related to the selectmen, not related to any other body in New London. They have their own commissioners, they have their own annual meeting, and they were established a number of years ago for the purpose of providing water to a distinct part of Springfield and a distinct part of New London. We invited them, the selectmen invited them to come and talk last night. I urge you, if you're interested in the subject of water, to review the video that was taken of last night's meeting. It was very comprehensive in terms of the things that Mr. Jakes covered, and he covered two subjects basically. The first was, which hasn't come up here at all yet today, is the question about the new water mains down Main Street. Those water mains are over 50 years old. They're falling apart. There've been a number of leaks and problems in those in the last several years, and the water precinct is finally going through the process of replacing those water pipes. The process at this point is that they have got all their engineering drawings done, and sometime in the next couple of weeks those drawings will go out to bid with contractors. They're hopeful that by the end of January they will have one or more contractors who want to do the project, in which case they will then determine with that contractor what that contractor's time availability is in terms of work crews and so on, and also what that contractor believes it's going to cost them to do it. Their engineer's estimate is it's going to cost about $5 million. That $5 million will be borne by the water precinct and its customers, including people who are in the precinct who aren't hooked up That's a nuance most people don't understand, but it does not affect most of you. It could get started as early as this spring. It's going to take sequentially 9 or more months to complete. Whether it's done all at once or over 2 years is still to be determined, so stay tuned. But sometime in 2024, 2025, we should have new water mains along Main Street, which is the major artery through which the water precinct's waters flow in the town of New London. There's a lot more about that you can hear on this video. I'm not going to take the short time we have here today to go over it. In terms of water capacity, which was the other issue that Mr. Jakes addressed at some length last night, I think the important thing to hear is there's a nuance, which is he has continually said that there is adequate water capacity to serve the current customers in the New London part of the water precinct, including the addition of a few new hookups every year. That seems to fit in line with the planning board's thoughts about what's going to happen with the ADU proposals, that there will be a few new units within the water precinct. And you need to distinguish between the water precinct and the rest of the town. The other nuance is that while both the project, the hospital project and the Twin Pines project were denied their ability to hook into the water system, that was caused by the state stating that the water capacity in the precinct was not adequate for those two properties and that they would have to seek other sources of water. And last night, Mr. Jakes made the point that he thinks there's only 2 additional properties within the water precinct that are of the size that would have the same problem as the project with hospital and with Twin Pines has had in terms of water. So it's an important nuance. The numbers are huge. New water capacity in New London in the precinct would cost between $10 and $23 million. That's scary numbers, but I think we should be careful not to overstate what the real impact is going to be, as long as the water precinct believes that it can provide adequate capacity within the precinct to its existing customers and to the other small number of additional hookups that they've had every year. So I will stop there. It's a huge subject. The numbers are big. It gets people very excited to think about water and so on, but you really need to listen to what he said last night. It took an hour, so it's pretty comprehensive, and see what you think. And just remember, the water precinct is a different entity from the town. I'll stop there, Janet.
Okay. Do you want to take questions? Or
Absolutely.
Does anyone have any question? Remember, Bill is not part of the water precinct.
He did note that I have been attending their meetings for the last 6+ months, and continually said that I had everything that I had told the town was accurate, and I agree that what he said last night was accurate. So,
Thank you, Bill. That was very helpful. It was brought up at the meeting last night, something about the town getting involved in water. Are you prepared to say anything, or would you like to say anything about that?
No, be happy to.
That'd
What
be
he
great.
said,
Thank you.
because he said something last night. He said that if the town is really concerned about long-term water capacity beyond the normal hookups within the precinct, that the town might consider entering into some sort of joint venture arrangement with the water precinct, whereby maybe the town would do the development and pay the bill, and that the water precinct would manage it for us. So he said that, frankly, the water precinct is too small to be able to take on a project of the size that he was referring to, and he went into some detail about different places you could get water and surface water and wells and so on. I'm not going there this morning, but what Bob is referring to is the fact that he suggested that if water was really a subject that we wanted to talk about, the selectmen might start thinking about a joint venture.
Okay, moving on. Kim and Bob, would you like to talk about sidewalks?
We would, indeed. Okay, when I came to New London, 10 plus or minus years ago, the big topic was gravel roads. I used to get lots of calls from people wondering when their gravel road would become paved. And I'm happy to say, thanks to the Public Works Department, lots of those calls have stopped. I've done a tremendous amount of paving in town. Now we're turning to sidewalks. Sidewalks in the last, especially the last couple of years, has really come to the forefront. Main Street is one obvious area that needs repair, but there are other areas, and people are beginning to say, hey, can we turn our attention to sidewalks? In the past 10 years, since I've been here, we've done quite a few. I think that the taxpayers in New London have been extremely generous when it comes to adding sidewalks and improving the ones we have. I think the first one when I was first started was the Siemens Road. The first one was the Pleasant Street from Job Siemens to the school. That was a safe route to schools project. So that helped the students more safely get to school. So that was one. We've also done the Cottage Lane to Main Street. So that's in the area of Siemens Road. And I think that one's the Cottage Lane one. We also did Parkside all the way down to the Outing Club. That was a repair. And some of you may remember the little teeny narrow sidewalk that went down. So the town of New London, the taxpayers have really invested in their sidewalks. They've Bob's last request for a $120,000 sidewalk plow was approved, and there really wasn't a lot of complaint from taxpayers, because I think people understand that once we have sidewalks, they're part of the road, and we have the same legal responsibility to clear them. So we have that plow. We also have the Elkins. The Elkins sidewalk was a couple of years. It was a grant project. Beautiful sidewalks in Elkins that go from Elkins Beach to the dam and all the way into Wilmot. And there's a pedestrian bridge as well. So we have beautiful sidewalks. There's lots more to do. We understand that. And our very capable Public Works Director will now speak to those future projects.
How are we all doing? One of the areas, unfortunately, that we're looking at doing is right in the middle of the Water Department's project, so we kind of put it on hold. One thing I think Bill didn't touch on is the engineers requested that we, I think it's for a year, is that correct, Bill? That we do not do anything to them because it's bonded. If we go in there and do anything to them and there's an issue, they're just going to walk away. It's going to be our problem to deal with. But what we're looking at is doing a stretch coming from Holman's Corner all the way up to Cougar Court. That's our hopes. When we took the money to do this, things have changed a little bit. We'll go as far as we can go and then revisit that. It's going to involve replacing curbs similar to what you saw in the photos up there. Fresh pavement, we'd like to try to get them at least 5 feet wide, because most of our machines now, that's what they are to maintain. You'll see that. Some lawns get damaged, and that's an unfortunate situation that we have to deal with, mainly because of the size of the machine. As far as adding sidewalks, I've looked at several locations. I've got a list that I've been doing since I took over. One of the areas I looked at because of the concerns is traffic is Bunker Road, but that's really not a very good area for one, because it would require a lot of trees being cut, excavation, just it doesn't make sense. It would take away from the beauty of the lake. The areas I've come up with that I think are more important would be looking forward, would be like Gould Road. And I do this looking at foot traffic as well as vehicle traffic. And Gould Road, you'll see a lot of students going back and forth from the college to the school, or students from the school, various times during the day. Another area would be going from Hayes Road to Holman's Corner on the opposite side of the road that the existing sidewalk is on, mainly because, and I know the chief has seen this before, Barn Playhouse will consistently walk down that side of the road, and that's a bad area. We do see a lot of foot traffic there. And other areas that I've looked at would be to continue from up County Road, well, if you come from 114 to Hilltop Place, a continuation there would be nice, and at some point continue the loop from there, catching up to Holman's Corner, so be a nice little walking area for residents. Parkside, Parkside Road, the Continuum is still supposed to do a stretch there from the Outing Club up to Lion Brook. And at some point, it'd be nice to extend that all the way up, back up onto County Road and tie it in as well. That's what I'm looking at. But right now, we're more concerned with addressing what we have, and that would be the section down here by Holman's Corner coming up to Cougar and going out to Cleveland's from Siemens Road. I don't know how many people walk that, but it's pretty narrow. I don't even think it's 3 foot wide. Very difficult for us to maintain.
For those who are new to the community, Holman's Corner starts at Spring Ledge Farm. So that's where Little Sunapee Road and Newport Road sort of meet. So when he refers to Holman's Corner, that's where it is.
Yeah, I guess that's an old school term.
Well, it is. A lot of people know it, but not everybody, I bet. So thank you, Bob. Does anyone have any questions for Bob? Thank you.
I just wonder, I know that the state is in charge of the crossings on Main Street. I just find that we have 1 or 2, maybe 3 far spaces behind. Is there anyone one can write letters to them and ask for a few more in between? It's very hard. Bill and I are pretty able. We run across it lots of times because the traffic is fast.
Yeah, we've actually had them come in, and unfortunately, they actually recommend taking them out. There's even more they wanted to remove. One was in front of the inn, and at the time I said, well, Dan Wolf owned that business, so I recommended they talk to him. And for some reason, that one's still there. So, but they look at it like people do not use them. And I will say I've painted the sidewalks for years before I took over. And it used to frustrate me to see going down through Main Street, fresh painted crosswalk, and they're walking about 15, 20 feet away from it crossing the road. So I understand that part of it. And the other issue we have is every time you put one in, Chief and I went down through, there's a lot of concerns with either hydrants or sight distance. And probably one of the biggest issues we've had is sight distances, which is probably more of a concern with somebody getting hit. I don't know if that helped you.
Also, if a crosswalk is near a sidewalk, there has to be a tip down. That means that you have to have a space between the sidewalk that goes right into the road. And some of the tip downs aren't really feasible. Yeah, so that a handicapped person in a wheelchair can get across the road and make it onto the sidewalk. And that's basically a problem. We talked about that, especially for Blue Loon, because that's one area where you live that it would be helpful to have a sidewalk. Yeah, I mean a crosswalk. Yep. Okay, are we good? All right. Thank you. All right. BB. My turn. BB's going to talk about the town budget and school issues. She gets the easy one.
I get to finish up with more financial talk. So we're currently working on the fiscal year 25 budget. The budget was approved by the Board of Selectmen on November 9th. There's an increase of approximately 12.2%, which includes $1 million transferred into the reserve accounts, which is an increase over last year's transfer of only $480,000, give or take. The Budget Committee has now started their review. They're meeting every Wednesday evening, now going into January, and there will be a public session to review the warrant articles in the budget on February 14th. Another topic that's been in the news lately is regarding school funding in New Hampshire, and as many of you know, it's a very complex topic. Two recent New Hampshire Superior Court decisions that came out right before Thanksgiving involving school funding. One called Conval versus State of New Hampshire involves the level of adequacy amounts. The State of New Hampshire prior to this suit said that $4,100 was a base adequacy rate for educating an individual student. This decision came down and said that number should be more around $7,350. That will constitute a $537.6 million increase in state spending. And the second case, which is interesting for the town of New London, was Rand versus the state of New Hampshire, where the court ruled that the statewide education property tax, which is called the SWEPT tax, is unconstitutional. This tax is collected by the towns, not the state. It's at a set rate in order to provide funding for each town's school district. And the judge ruled that the state's 2011 decision to allow wealthier towns to retain any excess SWEPT funds they collect is unconstitutional, and that the money should be distributed to poorer towns. So this court order prohibits the state from allowing towns to retain that excess SWEPT in the upcoming tax season, this winter and spring. Currently, under the state's formula, New London collects approximately $2.4 million, but only needs approximately 1.4 according to the state's formula. If this decision stands, that would mean New London would send $1 million back to the state to be redistributed. New London is joined with a group called Coalition Communities 2.0. We've retained the services of Sheehan, Finney, and Bass, and an appeal should be filed in this case. So it should not be affecting this year's budget. Fingers crossed. I encourage all of you to Google New Hampshire School Funding Fairness Project and look at their website. They have all sorts of webinars and white papers and information on school education funding in the state. Also, Reaching Higher New Hampshire, that's another website that has lots of great information. In other school news, a new superintendent was hired starting July 1st. His name is John Fortney. He's moving here with his family from just outside St. Louis, Missouri. He will be replacing Winifred Fenneberg, who has served the district admirably since 2015. And finally, with regards to the school budget, the school district has approved their final budget. I think it's around the neighborhood of $55 million. It's posted on their website. I encourage you all to take a look, and also encourage you all to attend the deliberative session on January 6th at 9 a.m. at the high school if you have any questions about the school budget. And that's it.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Bibi? No? Okay, thank you.
Perfect timing, Jan.
Yeah, the last item is regarding our reassessment, and I think that if anyone had any questions, we just did an incredible Q&A in the recent municipal matters, and you might want to look at it because it certainly explains the process, why you may be paying more or why you may be paying less. Chris and her team have done an amazing job responding to people with questions. So if you do have questions about it, please don't hesitate to talk to any of us about that. We'd be happy to do it one-on-one in private, so let us know if you do have questions. Since it's 9:30, I'm going to close the meeting unless there are any questions you'd like to ask that weren't on any of our topics. If not, thank you all for coming, really. We appreciate it. Happy holidays.